What happens when Denzel Washington calmly dismantles Donald Trump's record on live TV and the entire nation watches Trump lose his cool in real time? The answer left millions questioning what true leadership really looks like. The cameras were already rolling when Denzel Washington leaned forward slightly in his chair. His voice, measured, steady, the kind of tone that could silence a room, made people stop what they were doing and listen. This wasn't a rally. This wasn't a movie monologue. This was live television, a prime-time interview in front of millions of Americans. The host had asked a simple question about leadership in today's climate. Denzel could have kept it vague, offered a polished but generic response. Instead, he chose precision. "You know," he began, eyes locked on the camera, "when leaders make promises to the American people, their actions should line up with their words. And when they don't, we've got to hold them accountable." The studio audience, quiet until then, leaned in. The host nodded, sensing where this was headed. But Denzel didn't raise his voice, didn't frown or smirk. He just began to lay out examples, recent ones, of Trump's business dealings that undercut his own earlier pledges. He mentioned contracts in Arizona that fell apart, a failed project in Nevada where workers said they never got their full pay, and campaign promises that now rang hollow compared to his current statements. Each point came with a date, a record, a direct quote. Nothing speculative, nothing exaggerated. Denzel spoke like he was in the middle of a courtroom drama, stacking fact after fact until the weight of it became undeniable. The host, struggling to keep pace, glanced nervously at his notes. "So you're saying these contradictions, these gaps, are intentional?" Denzel didn't smile. "I'm saying the American people deserve honesty. Leadership isn't about the words you throw out on stage. It's about whether your record backs them up. And in this case, the record tells another story." For a moment, the room fell silent. Not the hollow kind of silence, but the heavy kind. The kind where you know everyone is processing what they just heard. The interview continued, but clips of that exchange were already being cut, captioned, and blasted across social media before the first commercial break. On Twitter, short clips with subtitles spread within minutes. One user wrote, "Denzel just dismantled Trump on live TV without even raising his voice." On Facebook, longer edits with commentary spread like wildfire through political groups. TikTok users looped the exact moment Denzel leaned forward, pairing his calm expression with Trump's past quotes. By the end of the hour, the hashtag #Denzel exposes Trump was trending everywhere. What struck people wasn't just what Denzel said, it was how he said it. No shouting, no insults, no performance. Just facts delivered with an unshakable calm. Meanwhile, across town, Trump was reportedly watching. Aides later leaked that he'd been in the middle of a casual dinner at Mar-a-Lago when the segment aired. At first, he laughed it off, telling those at the table, "Same old Hollywood, nothing new." But as the minutes passed and the video replayed, his laughter faded. He grabbed his phone, scrolling furiously through Twitter, watching the clips rack up millions of views. His hands shook slightly as he typed, "Fake news. Denzel is lying again. Disgraceful interview." The tweet went out instantly, but instead of slowing the storm, it only fed it. Newsrooms across the country were already preparing their headlines. Washington fact-checks Trump live on air. Calm Denzel, furious Trump. Cable networks rolled split-screen footage. Denzel speaking with quiet precision. Trump raging online in all caps. The contrast was impossible to ignore. For viewers at home, it felt like a glimpse into two Americas. One where calm leadership and truth carried weight, and another where anger fueled every word. Parents in Phoenix and Columbus whispered about how stark the difference looked. College students in dorm lounges replayed the clip, some laughing, others shaking their heads. Retirees in coffee shops debated whether this was a turning point or just another headline. The nation had seen clashes before, but this one hit differently. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was how effortlessly Denzel dismantled Trump's narrative. Or maybe it was because, for once, there wasn't shouting, just clarity. And clarity, when wielded right, can be the sharpest weapon of all. Denzel had delivered it with precision. Now Trump was ready to fire back with fury. The next morning, newspapers across the country carried the same image. Denzel Washington, seated comfortably, his hands folded, speaking with that deliberate calm that had become his trademark. The photo itself wasn't dramatic, but the headlines that framed it made clear how big the moment had become. Denzel calls out Trump's broken promises. Facts versus fury. A nation reacts. In Washington, D.C., television screens inside Union Station played the clip on repeat. Travelers on their way to work slowed down, earbuds half pulled out, staring as Denzel's words replayed yet again. At a Starbucks near the Capitol, two staffers from different offices shared a table. One shook her head, whispering, "He didn't even need to raise his voice. That's what made it sting." But Denzel himself wasn't lingering on it. That morning, he had breakfast quietly with his wife Paletta at their home in Los Angeles. She teased him lightly. "You realize you broke the internet again, right?" He chuckled but brushed it aside. For him, it wasn't about going viral. It was about drawing a line in the sand between rhetoric and reality. Later that day, Denzel sat down with his longtime advisor, Martin Fields, in a modest office near downtown. Martin leaned back in his chair, shaking his head with a mix of pride and caution. "You knew what you were doing, D," he said. "I just told the truth," Denzel replied. "Yeah, but the truth cuts sharper when you deliver it like that. Trump's not going to let it slide. You've poked the bear." Denzel didn't flinch. "I didn't poke anything. If he feels cornered by facts, that's on him." Meanwhile, in Palm Beach, Trump's inner circle was buzzing. He had spent much of the previous night firing off posts on Truth Social, each one more heated than the last. By morning, aides were scrambling to contain the fallout. "Sir, the coverage is everywhere," one advisor told him. "Fox is trying to spin it, but even they keep replaying the clip. It's dominating the cycle." Trump slammed his hand on the table. "It's a setup. Denzel planned this. He's trying to humiliate me. In the media, they're all in on it." The advisor tried to steer him towards strategy. "If we respond with policy specifics, we can counter this. We can point out where his record wasn't perfect." But Trump wasn't listening. His mind was fixated on the image of Denzel sitting coolly, dismantling him without breaking a sweat. That contrast, the composed Hollywood legend versus the furious ex-president, was eating at him. Back in Chicago, a group of college students gathered in a dorm lounge at the University of Illinois. One student, recording on her phone, narrated for her followers, "We're literally watching Denzel fact-check Trump live for the 5th time. This man didn't yell once, and Trump's losing his mind. This is history in real time." Her clip racked up hundreds of thousands of views by the end of the day. Cable networks noticed how ordinary people were engaging. CNN brought on former speechwriters and body language experts to analyze Denzel's performance. MSNBC ran a side-by-side montage of his calm delivery versus Trump's all-caps posts. Even conservative radio hosts, though defensive of Trump, admitted the optics were hard to fight. At the same time, inside Denzel's circle, debate stirred. Martin warned again, "If this spirals, you could get pulled deeper into the 2024 mess. Is that really what you want?" Denzel leaned back, taking a breath. "I want the country to remember what steady leadership looks like. If that stirs up noise, so be it." It wasn't bravado, it was clarity. But clarity on one side often sparks chaos on the other. And as the day went on, the atmosphere inside Trump's circle shifted from frustration to fury. He wasn't content with angry posts anymore. He wanted a stage, a microphone, an audience where he just, "Line me up with Hannity tonight," Trump barked at his aides. "We're going live. I'll set the record straight. People need to hear the truth from me, not from that guy reading off his notes." His team exchanged uneasy glances. They knew live interviews could be unpredictable, but once Trump had made up his mind, there was no stopping him. By late afternoon, promos were already running on Fox News. Trump responds live to Denzel's attacks. Tonight at 9. Denzel, back in LA, saw the promo flash across a muted TV screen in the corner of his office. He didn't react, didn't comment, just returned to the document he was reviewing. But silence has its own weight. And while Denzel stayed quiet, the stage was being set for Trump to erupt in full view of the nation. The lights in the Fox News studio glared down on Donald Trump as he adjusted his red tie, tugging at the knot with a sharp motion. His jaw shifted side to side, a tell he had before going on air, like a boxer bouncing before the bell. Producers hovered just outside the frame, whispering cues. Hannity, seated across from him, leaned forward with that familiar look of anticipation. He knew tonight's interview wasn't going to be calm, it was going to be a spectacle. Hannity wasted no time. Mr. President, last night Denzel Washington accused you of lying to the American people and pointed to your business record. What do you say to that? Trump straightened in his chair. Sean, let me tell you, it's disgraceful. Nobody's been treated worse than me. Denzel is jealous, okay? Jealous. I built an incredible empire, an amazing presidency, the best economy this country ever had. And now he comes on television spreading fake numbers, fake stories. It's a witch hunt. Another witch hunt. His voice rose, his hands slicing the air. He repeated himself, piling phrase on phrase, each angrier than the last. Hannity tried to guide him toward policy, asking about job growth or trade, but Trump kept circling back to Denzel. Denzel's a failure, everyone knows it. If you look at what he's done, weak stances, terrible takes, Hollywood lectures nobody cares about. I cleaned up the mess, and now he's attacking me. Disgraceful. Totally disgraceful. At home, millions of viewers watched. Some cheered him on. Others couldn't believe what they were hearing. Social media filled with the side-by-side clips. Denzel calmly citing records, and Trump, red-faced, railing against invisible enemies. The difference was stark. In a living room in Des Moines, Iowa, a retired couple sat on their couch watching the exchange. The husband shook his head slowly. He's not even answering the question. Denzel gave receipts. This is just yelling. His wife replied softly, people will see it. They'll know the difference. Meanwhile, in Phoenix, a group of Trump loyalists gathered in a sports bar. They clapped and hollered at every jab he threw. That's our guy, one man shouted, raising his beer. But even within that group, a younger woman frowned, murmuring, he sounds more upset than usual. It's not landing the same. Inside the studio, Hannity kept trying to pivot. Mr. President, let's focus on the future. If you run again, how will you? But Trump cut him off. We're running. We're going to win. And Denzel, he'll regret opening his mouth. Because when people look at the facts, really look at the facts, they'll see I was right all along. The problem was, Denzel had presented the facts, and Trump's furious tone only amplified that contrast. Later that night, clips from the Hannity interview circulated almost as quickly as Denzel's original comments. But instead of clearing his name, Trump's outburst gave critics more ammunition. Headlines the next morning read, Trump meltdown on live TV, facts versus fury, round 2. Denzel stays quiet, Trump loses control. Even some Republicans admitted privately that the optics were damaging. One senator, speaking off the record to a reporter, sighed. It looked like Denzel was the adult in the room, and Trump was the kid throwing a tantrum. Denzel, for his part, said nothing. No press release, no rebuttal. He went about his day quietly, visiting a local school in Maryland to talk about civic engagement. Cameras followed him, capturing images of him smiling with students, shaking hands with teachers, answering their questions thoughtfully. The footage made the contrast even sharper. While Trump was still raging about Denzel's remarks, Denzel was already moving on, staying grounded in community work. The public noticed. At a diner in Toledo, a group of truckers debated over breakfast. One leaned back in his booth. I didn't vote for Denzel, but you got to admit, the guy's smooth. He cut Trump down without even trying. Another, loyal to Trump, grumbled, smooth don't mean honest. Trump fights. That's what I like. But a third chimed in, yeah, but fighting ain't the same as leading. Look at last night, he looked desperate. The conversation echoed across the country, a split screen, not just on TV, but in everyday life. Denzel's calm logic versus Trump's anger. Evidence versus emotion. But anger has a way of growing, especially when fueled by humiliation. And as Trump stewed over the coverage, the battle was about to spill beyond the television screen and onto every social platform in America. By sunrise the next day, the internet had transformed into a battlefield. Twitter timelines were flooded with clips of Denzel's composed remarks, spliced against Trump's heated Fox News segment. The side-by-side comparisons weren't kind. One caption read, "Leadership versus meltdown." Another showed Denzel calmly listing facts while Trump shouted in all caps with the words, "Find the difference" plastered on top. On TikTok, creators stitched Denzel's quotes into trending sounds. A video that racked up over 1 million views in just hours opened with him saying, "Leadership is about honesty," before cutting to Trump yelling about witch hunts. The edit was set to dramatic music, and teenagers in the comments joked, "This feels like a Netflix documentary in real time." Even on Facebook, where Trump traditionally enjoyed stronger support, the divide was clear. Older voters shared the clips, arguing furiously in the comments. One grandmother from Indianapolis wrote, "Denzel never needed to scream, that's real strength." A Trump supporter fired back, "He's a liar." Trump is the only one who tells it straight. Dozens of replies followed, some cordial, many not. Inside Trump's team, aides monitored the chaos. A communications staffer named Carla sat at her desk scrolling through trending hashtags. Had Denzel exposes Trump, #Trump meltdown, had calms chaos. "They're everywhere," she muttered. Another aide tried to reassure her. "It'll blow over. These things always do." But Carla shook her head. "Not this time. The memes are brutal, and once people laugh at you, it's hard to get control back." Trump himself was glued to his phone, scrolling furiously. He barked across the room, "Look at this garbage. They're making me look weak. Weak. I was strong, the strongest. Nobody's ever been stronger." He slammed the phone on the table, red-faced, before snatching it up again to fire off another post. Denzel Washington is the worst actor turned lecturer in history. Totally dishonest. Terrible for America. The post went viral, but not the way he intended. Screenshots spread with sarcastic captions. "Sir, this is a Wendy's." Others paired his words with clips of Denzel smiling with school children in Maryland just hours earlier. The contrast became impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, in Cleveland, 2 high school teachers discussed the moment during their lunch break. One pulled out her phone, showing her colleague a TikTok where students had edited Denzel's calm delivery into a rap beat. "They're learning politics through memes now," she said. The other teacher laughed, then grew serious. "At least they're paying attention, and they can see who's keeping it together." Cable networks picked up on the social media wildfire almost instantly. CNN ran a segment called The Meme War, Denzel versus Trump. MSNBC brought in a cultural critic who argued, "This isn't just politics, it's about image. Denzel looks steady, Trump looks rattled. That's what sticks in people's minds." Even Fox struggled to spin it. On one morning show, a host tried pivoting by criticizing Denzel's Hollywood record, but producers still ran the clip side by side with Trump's angry reaction. Viewers at home couldn't miss the contrast. In Los Angeles, a group of college students gathered outside a cafe, laughing as they replayed the clips on their phones. "It's like watching 2 different species," one said. Another added, "Yeah, one's playing chess, the other's flipping the board." Not all reactions were playful, though. In parts of rural Pennsylvania, Trump supporters doubled down, posting messages of loyalty. "We don't care what Denzel says," one wrote in a local Facebook group. "Trump fights for us. That's all that matters." The thread grew to hundreds of comments, half defending Trump's passion, half mocking his anger. Political strategists across the spectrum were watching closely. One Democratic consultant noted, "Denzel doesn't even have to say another word. The contrast is doing the work for him." Meanwhile, a Republican strategist privately admitted, "It's bad optics. When your opponent looks calm and you look furious, you're losing the middle ground." As the day stretched on, Denzel remained silent. No tweets, no interviews. He let the storm swirl without stepping into it. His silence became part of the narrative, proof to many of discipline and restraint. By evening, the memes, edits, and commentaries had reached a fever pitch. Social media wasn't just amplifying the story, it was shaping the way Americans perceived it. To many, Denzel had landed a knockout blow without even raising his hand again. But political storms never stay confined to screens for long. And as the wildfire spread online, the next battleground was already forming on cable news, where pundits were eager to dissect every second of what had just happened. By the time the evening news rolled around, the story had grown into a full-blown television spectacle. Every major network cleared space in their programming schedules to cover the fallout from Denzel's remarks and Trump's fiery response. It was the kind of moment producers dream of: drama, politics, and two of the most recognizable names in America colliding in real time. On CNN, Anderson Cooper opened his show with the clip. "Let's take another look at this exchange," he said, his voice carrying that deliberate weight he used when something mattered. The footage rolled, Denzel calmly laying out facts, then Trump in the Fox studio, visibly heated, chopping the air with his hands. When the screen returned to the studio, Cooper raised an eyebrow. The contrast speaks for itself. At MSNBC, Rachel Maddow's producers had gone a step further. They had prepared a side-by-side montage. Denzel citing a contract dispute in Arizona, followed immediately by Trump dismissing him as jealous. Denzel listing a broken campaign pledge, Trump shouting about witch hunts. The montage ran 3 times, and each time Maddow shook her head with a slight smile. "This is not just a clash of personalities," she said. "This is a clash of styles, and right now, style is substance." Meanwhile, over at Fox, Sean Hannity worked hard to frame the interview as proof of Trump's resilience. He played clips of Denzel's interview, but spoke with a dismissive tone. "Denzel reading off his notes like he always does," Hannity said. "This is the same guy who gave us Hollywood lectures for decades, and now he wants to lecture President Trump?" Still, even as he defended Trump, the network kept showing the footage, feeding the contrast further. In Philadelphia, a group of friends gathered at a neighborhood bar, the TVs tuned to MSNBC. The bartender, drying glasses, nodded toward the screen. "He looks rattled, doesn't he?" One of the regulars replied, "Yeah, Trump's got energy, but it's all fire. Denzel's got ice, and ice lasts longer." Another chimed in, "It's like watching a boxer throw wild punches while the other guy just stands there waiting." Across the country in Dallas, a different scene played out. A family sat in their living room with Fox on. The father shook his head. "They're trying to make Trump look crazy, they always do." But his teenage daughter pushed back. "Dad, just watch. He does look kinda out of control." The father paused, not ready to agree, but unable to dismiss it entirely. Cable news panels dissected every angle. Body language experts explained how Denzel's relaxed posture communicated confidence. Communication specialists broke down the tone of each man's voice. Denzel's steady cadence versus Trump's rising pitch. Even sports commentators, invited as cultural voices, compared it to a lopsided game. On CNN, a former Republican strategist admitted, "Look, this is rough. Denzel laid out facts without theatrics, and Trump responded with anger. That's not how you win the middle ground." A Democratic analyst sitting beside him added, "Denzel doesn't need to run for anything. He's already making his point by showing the difference between leadership and reaction." The coverage wasn't confined to politics alone. Late-night talk shows jumped on it instantly. On The Late Show, Stephen Colbert opened with a joke. "Denzel gave a calm interview. Trump gave us an audition for Real Housewives of Mar-a-Lago." The audience roared with laughter. On Jimmy Kimmel Live, an edited skit ran showing Denzel sipping tea while Trump yelled in the background. Each joke, each replay, each commentary segment only deepened the impression. Denzel had scored a quiet but devastating win, while Trump looked cornered and angry. Back in Washington, Denzel watched none of it. Instead, he attended a dinner with friends at a small restaurant in Georgetown. A fellow guest asked him, "Did you see Hannity tonight?" Denzel smiled faintly and shook his head. "I don't need to," he said. "I know how this game works." But Trump wasn't smiling in Palm Beach. He stayed up past midnight, calling allies, demanding loyalty, venting about betrayal. "They're all laughing at me," he fumed to one confidant. "Denzel thinks he's so smart, but I'll show him." And while cable news replayed the clips endlessly, fueling national debates, Trump's anger was building into something more personal. For him, this wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about pride. And pride doesn't fade quietly. By the weekend, Trump's anger had hardened into something sharper. The outbursts on social media weren't slowing down. In fact, they were escalating. He wasn't just criticizing Denzel's interview anymore. He was going after him personally, dredging up old grievances and throwing them into the spotlight with renewed fury. On Truth Social, his posts read like fire alarms. Denzel Washington is the worst actor-activist ever. Weak, dishonest, everyone knows it. Don't forget his failures, disaster after disaster. Total phony. Why is Denzel even talking? He had his turn. Now he's desperate for attention. Because I'm winning again. The words were bold, the letters oversized, every post laced with capital letters. His supporters cheered, but critics saw something else. Insecurity bleeding through every line. At a rally in Tampa, Trump took it further. Standing before thousands, he pointed directly at the cameras. Did you see Denzel the other night? Sitting there like he's so perfect, reading off his little cards? Pathetic. He lies, folks. He lies more than anyone. And they treat him like a saint. The crowd roared, some chanting his name. But others watching at home noticed how often Denzel's name came up, how much space he seemed to occupy in Trump's head. In Washington, Denzel's friends debated whether he should respond. Martin Fields, his longtime advisor, paced in his office. He's making it personal now, D. You can't just sit on your hands forever. Denzel leaned back in his chair, calm as ever. I'm not here to trade insults, Martin. That's not leadership. If he wants to shout, let him shout, Martin pressed. But people might see your silence as weakness. Denzel shook his head. No, they'll see the difference. One man's losing control. The other isn't taking the bait. Meanwhile, everyday Americans were noticing the same thing. At a diner outside Pittsburgh, a group of steelworkers watched Trump's rally on TV during lunch. One of them, chewing slowly, said, "He's obsessed. Every other word out of his mouth is Denzel." Another nodded. It's like Denzel's renting space in his head for free. In Los Angeles, a podcast panel debated the moment. This isn't just politics anymore, one host argued. It's personal. Trump feels humiliated, and when he feels humiliated, he lashes out. That's his pattern. Her co-host replied, "Meanwhile, Denzel's strategy is silence. It's brilliant. The more Trump rants, the smaller he looks next to Denzel's calm." Even conservative circles weren't entirely aligned. A Republican senator, asked about Trump's attacks, sighed before choosing his words carefully. I think Americans are tired of personal insults. They want solutions, not schoolyard fights. But Trump wasn't hearing any of that. Surrounded by loyalists at Mar-a-Lago, he grew more animated with each conversation. One aide recalled him slamming a stack of newspapers on the table. Look at this. They're all running with Denzel's side. They're protecting him. It's a witch hunt, the biggest one yet. Another aide tried to calm him. Sir, if we focus on policy, we can reset the narrative, Trump shot back. Forget policy. People want a fighter. I'll hit harder than anyone's ever hit before. His words weren't just rhetoric. They were a declaration of intent. The insults grew harsher, the tone more aggressive. In one phone call to a friendly radio host, Trump labeled Denzel a total fraud and a national embarrassment. The host tried to steer the conversation back to 2024, but Trump kept circling back to Denzel again and again. The obsession was palpable. For Americans tuning in, the contrast grew sharper with each passing day. Denzel stayed focused on his schedule, meeting with educators, visiting community centers, speaking at a small-town library in Ohio about the importance of civic duty. Cameras caught him shaking hands with teenagers, his expression relaxed, his words thoughtful. The images told their own story. One man locked in a shouting match with himself, the other walking quietly through neighborhoods, connecting face to face. In living rooms, in offices, in break rooms across the country, people were asking the same question. Who looked more like a leader? But Trump wasn't asking questions anymore. He was issuing attacks, faster and louder by the day. And as his words grew sharper, the country itself was beginning to respond, not just online, but in everyday conversations that carried more weight than any rally ever could. By Monday morning, the clash between Denzel and Trump wasn't just a news story. It had become a kitchen table conversation across America. People weren't only debating what was said, they were comparing how each man carried himself. And in those comparisons, a picture was forming. At a small diner in Toledo, a waitress named Brenda poured coffee for two regulars. The men, both factory workers, had the morning paper spread across the counter. Denzel's calm photo was on the front page next to a screenshot of Trump mid-shout, finger jabbing the air. One of the men squinted at the paper. "Look at this. One looks like a teacher, the other like he's about to blow a gasket." Brenda leaned in with a smirk. "Guess which one people are going to trust more?" In a high school classroom in Denver, a civics teacher played both clips back-to-back for his students. The room filled with laughter during Trump's rant, then quiet during Denzel's steady voice. When the video ended, a student raised her hand. "So basically, one of them talks facts and the other just yells?" The teacher smiled. "That's one way to put it." Across the country in Phoenix, a group of truckers sat outside a gas station on their break, watching the clips on a phone. One, wiping grease from his hands, shook his head. "I voted for Trump, but man, he looks rattled. Denzel didn't even raise his voice." Another replied, "Yeah, but people like a fighter. They like fire." The first man took a drag from his cigarette and muttered, "There's fire, and then there's losing your cool. Big difference." Even late-night comedians were becoming part of the public's judgment. Jimmy Fallon joked, "Denzel gave America a master class in calm leadership. Trump gave us a master class in how not to handle criticism." Audiences laughed, but the point stuck. Meanwhile, Denzel stayed the course. That week, he visited a community center in Indianapolis, where he spoke to a group of high school volunteers. Cameras caught him listening, intently as a teenager described her project to clean up local parks. His words were measured, focused on civic engagement. The contrast with Trump's weekend rally couldn't have been clearer. Reporters traveling with Denzel asked if he'd respond to Trump's personal attacks. He smiled, shrugged, and said, "I think people can tell the difference between facts and noise." It was only one sentence, but it replayed across networks for hours. In living rooms across America, people weren't just hearing those words, they were repeating them. In Seattle, a mother of two told her husband while folding laundry, "He's right, you can tell the difference, it's night and day." In Florida, a retired veteran told his bowling buddies, "Denzel doesn't need to yell, he just lays it out. That's leadership." Not everyone agreed, of course. In rural Missouri, a group of farmers discussed the moment while loading hay bales. One man said firmly, "Trump's the only one fighting for us. Denzel's just smooth talking." Another replied, "Fighting's good, but what's he actually saying? Seems like he's more worried about Denzel than about us." The divide was there, but for many Americans, Denzel's calm presence was winning the day. Pollsters noticed it too. A quick survey released midweek showed independents overwhelmingly said Denzel came across as measured and trustworthy, while Trump was described as angry and defensive. On talk radio, callers lit up the phone lines. One woman from Ohio told a host, "I used to love Trump's energy, but this time it feels desperate, like he's rattled." A man from Texas shot back, "He's not desperate, he's fighting. We need fighters." The host chuckled, saying, "Oh, sounds like America's split right down the middle." But for many, the verdict was already clear. Denzel had presented facts calmly. Trump had lashed out emotionally, and when ordinary people compared the two, they knew which one looked more like a leader. The battle wasn't over, though, because while the public was forming its judgment, Washington's political class was already calculating the fallout, and their responses would carry just as much weight as any meme or late-night punchline. In Washington, the echoes of Denzel's calm takedown and Trump's furious response were impossible to ignore. Capitol Hill buzzed with reactions as lawmakers shuffled between committee meetings and press gaggles, each weighing how to spin the moment. The clash wasn't just another headline, it was a political flashpoint that exposed deep divides within the Republican Party itself. At a morning press conference, Senator Claudia Reynolds of Arizona, a Republican known for occasionally breaking ranks, chose her words carefully. "Look, Americans want leadership grounded in facts and steadiness. They're tired of constant drama." Denzel Washington demonstrated composure. And while I disagree with him on policy, his delivery reminded us of something we've been missing. Her comments made instant headlines, drawing both praise and outrage. In contrast, Senator Rick Morrison of Texas, one of Trump's most loyal defenders, thundered to reporters, "This is all smoke and mirrors. Denzel Washington is a Hollywood fake who doesn't speak for real Americans." President Trump is the only one who fights every single day. That's what leadership looks like. Fighting. His words were clipped into short videos shared widely in conservative circles, feeding the narrative that loyalty to Trump meant loyalty to the base. Democrats, meanwhile, saw an opening. House Leader Patricia Gomez seized the moment on the floor of Congress. What we saw this week is the difference between fact and fury, between accountability and chaos. The American people deserve calm leadership, not tantrums on live television. Her speech drew applause from her side of the aisle and sparked heated rebuttals from Republicans. Cable networks pounced on the split. CNN panels debated whether Reynolds' remarks hinted at cracks in Trump's grip on the GOP. MSNBC ran a headline banner, "Republican Rift over Trump's Meltdown." Even Fox struggled with the balancing act. Some hosts backed Morrison's fiery defense, while others acknowledged that Denzel's composure had landed well with independents. Behind closed doors, strategists were running numbers. Pollsters briefed donors and party leaders, showing data that suggested independents, critical in swing states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, were shifting in Denzel's favor after the exchange. One Democratic strategist, speaking at a closed-door fundraiser in Philadelphia, told the crowd, "This isn't about 2008 nostalgia. This is about contrast, calm versus chaos, and right now voters are watching closely." Meanwhile, inside Republican war rooms, tension grew. An aide to a prominent senator admitted privately to a reporter, "We're walking a tightrope. We can't alienate Trump's base, but every time he spirals like this, moderates slip away. It's a nightmare." Denzel, as usual, stayed silent. He attended a panel discussion at Howard University where he spoke with students about civic duty and the importance of critical thinking in politics. Cameras captured him smiling as a young woman asked, "How do you stay calm when people are attacking you?" His response was simple, because leadership isn't about proving how loud you can be. It's about staying grounded, even when others are not. The clips circulated quickly, reinforcing the contrast, without Denzel ever mentioning Trump by name. In local politics, the moment trickled down too. City council meetings in places like Milwaukee and Columbus saw members quoting Denzel's line about actions matching words. School board candidates referenced the exchange in campaign speeches, framing themselves as the steady hand in turbulent times. Meanwhile, donors and lobbyists took notice. A well-connected Republican lobbyist confided to a journalist over drinks in Georgetown, "The money guys hate this. They want predictability, not meltdowns. They'll back Trump in public, but privately, they're nervous." The White House, though not directly involved, was forced to comment. The press secretary fielded questions about the Denzel-Trump clash, trying to steer the conversation back to policy, but reporters wouldn't let it go. One asked bluntly, "Does the president agree that leadership is about calm and honesty?" The dodging answer did little to kill the story. For everyday Americans watching the political maneuvering, the message was clear. The ripple of Denzel's comments had grown into a wave. What started as a simple interview had cracked open deeper questions about the nature of leadership and the future of the Republican Party. But politics has a way of magnifying every gesture, every word. And while leaders debated in Washington, ordinary Americans were beginning to ask a bigger question. What does this clash really mean for the country itself? Across the nation, the clash between Denzel and Trump was no longer just a story about two men. It had become something symbolic, an argument about what kind of leadership Americans wanted in the years ahead. Coffee shops, classrooms, office break rooms, even church gatherings were humming with conversation. People weren't just repeating sound bites. They were grappling with what those sound bites meant for the future. In Columbus, Ohio, a church youth group held a discussion after Sunday service. A teenager named Isaac raised his hand. "When I watched Denzel talk, he looked like he was teaching. When I watched Trump, he looked like he was mad." "Isn't one of those better for a leader?" His pastor smiled, replying, "Sometimes the way a person carries themselves tells you more than the words they use." Parents in the room nodded. Many had thought the same thing. In Phoenix, a group of nurses sat in their hospital cafeteria replaying clips on one of their phones between shifts. One nurse sighed, "I don't even like politics, but Denzel sounded steady. I'd trust him in an emergency." Another responded, Yeah, and Trump looked like the guy yelling at the front desk because he didn't like the wait time. The table erupted in laughter. But the point was clear. Tone mattered. Meanwhile, in Washington, think tanks and scholars were analyzing the episode with grave seriousness. One political historian explained on PBS, moments like these crystallize public memory. Denzel's calm under pressure versus Trump's agitation. It will live in the political imagination far longer than any single policy debate. On the ground, Americans were quietly reshaping their views. In Detroit, a mother of three talked with her teenage son while waiting for the bus. "Why do people always fight in politics?" he asked. She pointed to the newspaper in her hands, showing the contrasting photos. "Because some people think yelling makes them strong. Others know that being calm can be stronger." Pollsters confirmed what conversations suggested. A survey conducted that week showed a noticeable shift among suburban voters. When asked who they associated with stability, Denzel scored 68%. Trump, just 24%. Words like chaotic and angry dominated the responses about him. Still, Trump's base didn't waver. At a rally in Oklahoma, he railed again, hammering Denzel's name into nearly every sentence. The crowd cheered, waving signs. Yet even within the cheering, there were murmurs. A reporter overheard one man say to his wife, "He keeps talking about Denzel like he's running against him. Shouldn't he be talking about Biden?" That observation summed up what many were noticing. Trump was locked in a battle with the past, while Denzel was speaking to the present. Late-night comedians kept it alive too. On Saturday Night Live, a sketch portrayed Denzel calmly sipping tea while Trump ranted in the background, red-faced and sweating. The audience roared with laughter, but behind the humor was a truth millions recognized. The bigger picture wasn't about partisanship anymore. It was about what Americans wanted in leadership. Was it fire and constant outrage, or calm, measured confidence? The clash made that choice visible in ways polls and speeches never could. Denzel himself gave voice to it subtly during a Q&A at a library in Maryland. A college student asked him, "What do you think people should look for in leaders now?" Denzel paused, then replied, "Look for someone whose actions line up with their words. Look for someone who can keep their head when the pressure's on. That's when you see character." The line wasn't aimed at Trump directly, but everyone knew who it applied to. Within hours, it was trending online, quoted in memes, articles, and TikToks. In kitchens, offices, and schools, the debate carried on. People argued, joked, reflected. But underneath all the noise, the clash had already planted a seed. Americans weren't just talking about two men. They were questioning what leadership itself should look like. And that question carried weight. Because as the dust settled, the story was no longer just about Denzel exposing Trump. It was about America exposing its own expectations for the future. By the end of the week, the noise had started to soften, but the images still lingered in people's minds. On one side, Denzel Washington, seated calmly in a chair, speaking in a voice that felt steady and deliberate, stacking facts like bricks in a wall. On the other, Donald Trump, red-faced under studio lights, jabbing his finger at the air, repeating the same lines with rising volume, each word sounding more desperate than the last. The story had outgrown politics. It had become a mirror for the country, reflecting what people valued when the heat was on. Some admired Trump's fire, his refusal to back down no matter the cost. But more and more ordinary Americans seemed to lean towards something different, something steadier. In Cincinnati, a father explained it to his teenage daughter while they sat in the traffic. "See, leaders get challenged all the time. What matters isn't just what they say, but how they act when they're challenged." Denzel showed calm. Trump showed anger. "You tell me, which one would you trust in a crisis?" The girl thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. In Boston, a group of college students debated over late-night pizza. One argued, "Trump fights, and that's what people love." Another shot back, "But what's he fighting for? Himself, his pride?" Denzel looked like he was fighting for the truth. That's a big difference. At a barbershop in Detroit, customers gathered around the television, conversation cutting between sports highlights and politics. The barber, clippers buzzing in his hand, summed it up simply. Leadership ain't about who yells the loudest. It's about who keeps their cool when everybody else is losing theirs. Heads around the shop nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Denzel never strayed from his approach. He didn't issue fiery rebuttals. He didn't meet Trump's insults with his own. He continued with his schedule: schools, community centers, libraries. His silence was not weakness, it was discipline. And in that discipline, many saw strength. Trump, on the other hand, kept swinging. More rallies, more posts, more outbursts. Each time his words seemed sharper, but each time the contrast grew clearer. Anger without control can be as damaging as silence without purpose. And the public was beginning to see which side of that equation each man occupied. For Americans watching, the lesson felt bigger than politics. It was about life itself. In workplaces, families, friendships, when pressure builds, when criticism comes, when someone challenges you, the real measure of strength isn't in how loud you shout, but in how steady you remain. The clash between Denzel and Trump offered the country a choice: chaos or calm, noise or clarity, pride or patience. And in the quiet judgment of millions of living rooms, coffee shops, and classrooms, calm seemed to hold the advantage. As one woman in Minneapolis told a reporter while leaving her grocery store, "Sometimes you don't need a fistfight to see who's stronger. Sometimes it's the one who stays standing without swinging." And that was the moral that lingered. Not that Denzel had won or Trump had lost, but that America had been reminded of something timeless. Leadership isn't about decibels, it's about dignity. So as the headlines faded and the social media memes gave way to the next viral story, the lesson stayed. People carried it into their homes, their whims, their relationships. They remembered that a calm voice could cut through a storm louder than a shout ever could. That's the kind of leadership America still craves. And that's the kind of lesson worth holding on to. If you value stories like this, stories that dig deeper than the noise and remind us of what really matters, don't forget to subscribe. More stories are coming. Stories that challenge. Stories